Good morning, and welcome to the 2020 Charlemae Rollins President's Program. I'm Cecilia McGowan, immediate past president for ALSC. I had hoped to see you in person in Chicago, but my disappointment is lessened in knowing that many more of you will be able to join us today. And you'll be able to do repeat viewings and share it with your students. As we begin, I would like to acknowledge and thank Paige Bentley Flannerly of the Deschutes Public Library, Gay Hinchcliffe of the King County Library System, and Sarah Paulin of ALSC for 2 years of cheerful and patient meetings, plannings, and revisions so we could bring this program to you. Thank you. Closed captioning is available as part of this program. If captioning doesn't come up automatically, please use your Zoom controls to turn them on. And now I have the exciting honor to welcome and introduce Cece Bell, Erin Entrada Kelly, Oge Mora, and Janet Wong.
Sarah, do you want to advance the slides? There we've got Cece, Erin, and Oge, and me. Thank you so much, Cecilia, and thank you to ALSC for supporting this virtual program. Let's start with a poem I wrote, Ways to Say Hello. I'll read it once through and show the motions that I like to do with this poem, and then I'll read it again, and you can move any way you like at home, okay? All right? So ways to say hello. Foot wave. Air bump. Jazz hands. Heart thump. Thumbs up. Clap hello. Chicken wing, elbow. Rabbit ears. Fish face. I bring you greetings from inner space. Yay! Now let's do it one more time, really quickly, and you join in, move any way you want, okay? All right? So, foot wave. Let's get those feet up there. All right, good job. Air bump. Jazz hands. Heart thump. Thumbs up. Clap hello. Chicken wing, elbow. Rabbit ears, fish face. I bring you greetings from inner space. Woo! Thank you. Give yourselves a round of applause. Good job. Cecilia, do you want to tell us about the next slide?
Oh, yeah, that is from LDEFO, and it's actually getting reissued with a whole bunch of back matter. It is not a sequel, I'm sad to say, but I'm happy to say that it has a lot of process pictures and photographs of people that are featured in the book, and fan mail and all kinds of stuff. So it's sort of like a DVD with extras. And so that's that. And then the Knowledge is Power is one of the panels from the book that just talks about how when you are feeling like you're a not very strong person, that reading and knowledge can get you a long way in not feeling that way anymore. So just sort of someone like me always overcompensates, and studying hard was definitely one way that I overcompensated. But yeah, that's what that is.
Cecilia McGowan, can you add a little bit about this Knowledge is Power slide?
Yes. So
your microphone is off, Cecilia.
Thank you. So, Cece, knowledge is power, as you've said. You could really, really study, but we're going to make it easy for all of you because this program is being recorded and we'll also be able, you'll be able to download the entire PowerPoint slideshow and a PDF with links to all kinds of online resources featuring Cece, Aaron, and Oge. We're going to give you everything you need to share your favorite parts of this session in your own libraries.
Excellent. Well, next slide. In her latest book, We Dream of Space, Erin Entrada Kelly, in the voice of her character, Miss Salonga, a science teacher, says, each of us should strive to change every single day, to be better explorers, to be better teachers and students, to be better humans, to just be better. Let's look at this hour together as just one step in our journeys to be better. Let's make this a safe space and let's really stretch ourselves to learn from each other. In the spirit of learning, a few times throughout this program, we'll take some short questions from you from the Q&A box. But if your questions aren't answered today, let's dive into them together on social media, okay? Today is just one step in our journeys together. The next slide will show you some hashtags that we'd like to use. If something comes up and you want to share it with the world, if you're on Twitter, go ahead and use this hashtag. Remember, we do also have the Q&A box. All right, Cecilia McGowan.
Okay. So yes, let's keep this conversation going even after this program. And do please be sure to use the hashtag ALSC PP 2020, hashtag ALA Virtual 20, and at We Are ALSC. Okay.
All right.
All of this will be on your PDF. Are we ready?
Yes.
Let's go.
All right, Zoom, off we go. Cece, Aaron, and Oge, your books help us become better humans. Thank you. Can you tell us about any particular interactions that you've had with readers at libraries, schools, bookstores, online, or in letters where you felt that your work made an especially strong impact? Why don't we start with Aaron? Aaron Entrada Kelly.
Thank you, Janet. I'm so happy to be here. So I think all of us would agree that every interaction is meaningful in some way. One thing that I love is when young people write something or draw something and they give it to me. So I keep some of those, this is one, around me in my writing space. And the fact that they feel safe enough to share something creative makes me feel really good. And it also, it kind of encourages and empowers me when young people feel safe enough to share their personal experiences. So I spoke at one school, and afterwards, one of the teachers walked up to me and said, your books talk a lot about bullying, and I'm so thankful that we don't have that problem at our school. And as soon as she walked away, a kid comes up to me, a little boy, and says, I really liked your presentation because I'm being bullied. So there's this disconnect, I think, sometimes that books can help fill the gap, and I've had parents tell me that they've read books, one of my books, Blackbird Fly, for example, and her daughter actually saw someone sitting alone at lunch and invited her to sit with them because that's something that happens in Blackbird Fly. So there's so many interactions that are meaningful in different ways for so many different reasons.
Wow, very powerful. Thank you for sharing that. Oge, can you tell us about some of the interactions that you've had with readers?
Totally. I think Erin said it perfectly. Like, the cool thing about making books is, like, once you make a book, it doesn't actually belong to you anymore, and you can just really kind of give it away to your readers, and seeing how your book can really speak to those experiences that they have in their lives is a really special thing. So, like, I've had instances where, like, something that sticks out to me was I had been doing a talk, and I was actually about Saturday, and a woman came up after me, and she, like, rushed up to me in, like, tears, and she was like, I know you're leaving, but, like, I need you to sign this book because my daughter's name is Ava, and I've been raising her by myself, and you've literally written our story. And thank you for that. And this book means so much. And so it was kind of this wild moment, and signing this book for a little Ava out there was a really special thing. Another thing that sticks out to me, I was doing a collage workshop with some first graders. And I always show kids, oh, this is my self-portrait of myself I drew when I was in first grade. All right, I want you guys to do some self-portraits. And one of the little boys, and he was really shy about it because I had to convince him not to try to like throw it away or anything like that, was that he drew the little boy from Thank You Amu, because for him, that was him, you know? And so it's just really, it's very kind of, when we like think about this panel and it being about authentic stories, it's so interesting how much authentic stories can resonate with readers, and they can find a place for themselves in these books.
Right. In the specific details, we communicate the universal. Cece Bell, can you tell us about some of your interactions that you've had with readers?
Absolutely. I really liked what Oge said about once you put a book out there, it doesn't belong to you anymore. That's so true. And it's especially true for, of all my books, it's especially true with LDEFO. And I think one of the great things that happens when I go to school visits is that often a kid will raise their hand in a whole sea of kids and announce, I have hearing aids too. And that is a massive big deal because I was not that kid. I could not have said those words. And there have been times when teachers and parents have said that their children had felt awkward or different or ashamed of their hearing aids, and the book really helped them see it more positively. So that's been huge for me. But my favorite response is how many people who aren't necessarily deaf, the book really speaks to the feelings of isolation and loneliness that everybody has. And I think I hear that a lot, you know, I just hear that a whole lot. And then in terms of my other goofier book, it's always good to hear that this book made me laugh, because that's really my goal as a children's book person, is to make people have at least 1 minute of pleasure in their lives, and humor and that kind of thing. So.
I love those answers. Thank you. Thank you, the three of you. Sarah, let's go back to the slides. Well, Rudine Sims Bishop has said this about authenticity. You feel it, you recognize it, it mirrors something in your own experience or life. We're all made up of many experiences, and many of us have multiple identities. So let's talk about authenticity by looking first at intersectionality and explore the many ways we define ourselves, okay? So this slide shows a dictionary definition of intersectionality, focusing on understanding the experiences of marginalized people as overlapping in multiple categories like gender, race, class, and more. This next slide offers an even better definition for me. As Erin writes in the voice of her character Bird, it doesn't make sense to only be one thing, does it? So, with intersectionality in mind, can the three of you share some thoughts on your multiple identities and how they have popped up in your work? Let's start this time with Oge.
Well, when I read about that, it makes me immediately think of my experience as a child reading Tar Beach by Faith Ringgold, and how when I first read that book, it was the first time I could see, like I could look at the world in a way and see a place for myself in it. And this book about this little Black girl with skin and hair and like this neighborhood a lot like mine made me consider, it made me consider that maybe little girls like me were like worthy of being cherished on a page, which really shouldn't be a radical thought, but it was a radical thought at the time. And the fact that Faith Ringgold was the person who wrote that made me also think, well, and maybe I can write those kinds of stories. You know, I think when you're at the intersection or you deal with intersectional identity, it's a Black woman, Nigerian American, all these sort of things, there's a way that the world or publishing can sometimes want to limit these experiences as niche and only really existing for a specific kind of subset of people. But when I think about my writing as a Black woman, I definitely think about that Toni Morrison quote of, I can accept the labels because being a Black woman is not a shallow place, but a rich place to write from. It doesn't limit my imagination, it expands it. And I think it's something really exciting where I feel like I can exist in my entirety. You know, I can be in the in-between and be between all of these things on the page, and it only gives more of an opportunities for readers to kind of have these images resonate and resonate with them, really.
I love that answer. And if you're viewing out there, there are the resources in a PDF that Cecilia McGowan talked about earlier. And one of those resources under Oge's name is a video clip of her Caldecott honor reaction, which was so full of joy. And you can hear her talking more about the influence of Faith Ringgold's Tar Beach. So please look for that video in the resources. Erin Entrada Kelly, do you have an answer to this?
Sure. You know, listening to that answer, which was fantastic, made me think about when I was a kid. And I started writing when I was very, very young, you know, 8 or 9, 10 years old. And I still have all those. And what's interesting to me when I look back on them is that all of the characters had blonde hair and blue eyes. It never occurred to me for a second to write a character, forget being Filipino American, but it didn't even occur to me to write characters with dark hair, dark eyes, dark features, because that's not what I saw when I was growing up. So one thing that's really encouraging about the changes that are happening now is that kids have access to those things in a way that they didn't before, which I think is really important because no one is invisible. No one should be treated as they're invisible. When I think about my different identities, of course, being a Filipino American informs that identity, but I think when I think about my identity in relation to my characters and the writing I do, it kind of goes back to what Cece was talking about earlier, that loneliness and feelings of otherness are universal. You know, it's not just limited to your race or your religion or whatever it may be. And so whenever I'm writing, that's kind of the identity that I'm channeling, is remembering what it felt like to be that lonely 10, 11, 12-year-old girl, you know, feelings of otherness based on how I looked, but also all these other things that all of us feel, especially at that age. And that's kind of the identity that I'm always keeping in mind when I'm writing my books. And, you know, my hope is, Cece said that for at least 1 minute of pleasure is, you know, she's accomplished her goal. And for me, it's, you know, if a kid can feel less alone when they're reading a book, even if it's just the duration of reading my book or any of our books, then that's what I'm after.
Well, one thing I want to know, Erin, is whether you are a science nerd. Because when I read We Dream of Space, I thought that character Bird, she came from somewhere deep inside Erin. And I wonder if all of that was research, or are you a science nerd? And you drew those diagrams, right?
I did. And I am not a science nerd. I am a hardcore book nerd. But Bird, like me in the book, you know, she has imaginary conversations with Judith Resnick, one of the astronauts on the Challenger. And I did that too when I was growing up, not with Judith Resnick, but with my own versions of different people. So she definitely comes from an honest place.
Great. Cece Bell, do you have an answer for us about your multiple identities?
Well, sure. Of course, you know, everybody knows now that I'm deaf, and I wear hearing aids. And something I don't talk about as much is how much the autism spectrum has informed my life, especially as an adult. I have a husband with Asperger's, a son with Asperger's. I'm pretty sure my dad has it. You know, it's just like all over my my family, and I myself am extremely introverted and really feel like there's a place for me on that spectrum too. But growing up as a deaf kid in the 1970s and 80s, I think that felt like a time when saying that you had a disability made other people very uncomfortable. And it still does today, I think. And so I developed early on the ability to make people laugh as a way to get them comfortable with me. And so that clearly informs my work. I am unable to create a book that is serious and heartfelt. And, you know, I mean, El Defo to some degree, yes, but there's plenty of funny stuff in there too, because I feel like it's very important for people to know that people who feel different from them are just as capable of being funny and smart as anybody else. And so I think that's probably the number one way that my deafness as part of my identity has informed the things I do. And that isolation that I felt as a kid, I still feel as an adult, because I miss a lot of what's being said, especially in a group. And so I've never forgotten what that feels like. And that comes up a lot in my work, especially the books that are more about friendships and trying to find friendships that work.
Excellent answers. Thank you so much. Are you ready to take some questions from our audience? Cecilia McGowan,
Yep.
do you want to ask some questions?
I do. We're going to take a question from our question box right now. Have you encountered requests from publishers or others to write less authentic, parentheses, non-BIPOC characters? If so, how have you handled such requests?
I guess I'm answering this. I don't think I've received that request ever. I don't think I've ever had an editor tell me what I'm going to write about. I've had editors say, we don't like this story, but not that you're not allowed to write it.
Same here.
Same here, yeah.
Okay. All right.
Well, actually, on that question, I want to say, Erin and Trotta Kelly, when I was reading We Dream of Space, and I think there's only one Filipino character, Ms. Salonga, right? I was actually really happy that the family was not Filipino, at least for the first half of the book, 2/3 of the book, because when they were fighting and yelling at each other, I said to myself, good, I'm so glad that here we don't have a case of representation, because we didn't, even though we do have that, right? And we do have the model minority thing to battle, I just felt like we didn't need to have that family be Filipino. Can you tell us something about that?
That's actually not the first time I've heard that. And it's not something that I necessarily consciously decided. But so, yeah, I guess it's an unintentional thing that people have commented on that was not intentional. You know, I never set out with intention to write, oh, my characters are going to be this race, and oh, my characters are going to be doing this. It's always just however the story kind of comes to me, I guess you could say. So that's how the story arrived in my imagination. So it wasn't necessarily a conscious choice, but it certainly resonated with people.
Cecilia McGowan, do you want to ask another question from the audience?
Yes, here's another question. What books do you love and would you recommend to kids and librarians that you think are under promoted right now?
That's a great question.
Mhm.
Maybe Erin will go first, then Oge, then Cece.
Yes. Oh, there are so many. But one book that I would love to encourage everyone to read is Show Me a Sign by Anne Claire Lazat. It came out during the pandemic. It's an incredible, incredible book about a deaf community on Martha's Vineyard. It's historical fiction. It's got adventure. It's got mystery and intrigue. It's got great representation. So I'm actually on a panel with her. I'm so excited. I'm on a panel with her and Lynn Kelly, who wrote Song for a Whale, with the Middle Ground Book Fest that's coming up in August. So I've really been trying to encourage people to pick up that book. It's really an incredible book.
Can you repeat the title?
Yes, it's Show Me a Sign is the title. I believe it's Scholastic. Incredible book. There's so many, but that's the first one that comes to mind.
Oge Mora, do you have a favorite book that you feel hasn't caught people's attention as much as it should?
I think maybe a book I would say is Octopus Stew by Eric Velasquez. So funny. It's just such a riot. I think it's such a great read aloud, and I don't think people mention it enough. It's imbued as just a wonderful, authentic kind of story, but it's incredibly clever. I really enjoy that picture book, so I think that's a picture book that's on my mind.
Octopus Stew.
Octopus Stew.
Do they make stew out of octopus in this book?
Oh, you gotta read it, but it's just about this little boy who's like telling this story, and it's one of, you gotta check it out. It's a really, really clever book.
Yeah, we can't have spoilers. No spoilers.
I was just trying to make a connection between the thick red stew, and thank you, Amu, and the octopus stew, but I didn't know if the octopus was going to be in a stew.
Oh no! Like he's this little boy, and he's like telling this story to his family, and it's whether I'm not going to say anything more about the octopus stew because I feel like that's giving a portion of it away. But I think the thing about that book, and it just made me laugh. It is just a hilarious, fun book, but it also still has a lot of warmth to it, and I just think that it's great that he was able to balance that so magnificently.
I think 800 holds on Octopus Stew just went on in libraries across the country. Cece Bell, do you have a favorite book that we really want to get people to take another look at?
I absolutely am crazy about One Crazy Summer by Rita Williams Garcia and the 2 follow-up books that came after that. And those books are just dynamite, and they are very different from my own experience, but the way she wrote, I felt like I was right there with those sisters. And I think I'm super picky about the things that I read, and these were perfect. All 3 of those books are perfect. So I would definitely recommend them. And then all of my picture book recommendations are from another time, long, long ago. I'm just a big old nostalgic mess, but I'm a huge fan of Alice and Martin Provenson and all of their books and illustrations. And so you don't see them out there as much anymore because they were, from a long time ago. But if you ever get to check one out, do so, because the illustrations are just, I mean, they're so beautiful. So those would be mine.
Well, let's stay with you, Cece Bell. Let's look at the slide here. In the Chicken Brain books, you present total disasters in communication in hilarious ways, but also ways that really lend themselves to teachable moments and discussions with older readers. When we think about our country's current problems, I think a lot of it comes down to monumental and ridiculous failures to communicate. In these books, the lack of understanding is completely frustrating to Chick and completely puzzling to Brain. Cece Bell, how can the Chicks of the world deal with these kinds of situations? How can we get through to the brains? Can you tell us about a complete misunderstanding that you've had with respect to something in one of your books or in your life?
Sure. Well, in terms of misunderstandings, I'm pretty sure I had a misunderstanding at the beginning of this panel when you showed the slide of knowledge is power. I think that slide was meant for Cecilia and not for Cece. And then I started running my mouth, and then I sort of like, oh, wait. And so that would be a classic one. And my name is Cecilia, and Cece and Cecilia sort of sound the same. And so that would be a misunderstanding. And those misunderstandings happen every single moment of my life. That's just how it goes. But in terms of what the chicks could say to the brains or how they could deal with them, I think it would be really nice if all the chicks could be patient and kind and even deal with some of this with humor. I know I keep going back to humor, but it really is a great way to communicate with people. And a good example of that is during the Black Lives Matter moment. And, I was looking for ways to educate myself. And I kept turning to the television show Seth Meyers because he kept having people on, Black women that I really admire, like Amber Ruffin and Nicole Byer and Tiffany Haddish, and they were funny and they were giving this information, vital information, but they were doing it with humor, and it was a great way to communicate that information. And I think if we can just, not that these problems are things that we can laugh at, but it's a language that we can use to help just navigate that information, to make it easier to accept and handle and hear. And so I think that would be the most thing, one of the best ways to do that. But maybe even more than that, just kindness, just kindness. That goes a long, long way.
I love that answer. And I think that if there's even only one thing that we take away from today, it's when we're out leading our lives and we encounter a brain, the next time you encounter a brain, remember what Cece said, and don't be frustrated, don't be angry, be chick and be kind, right? React with kindness. I love that. Well, on the next slide, in We Dream of Space, Ms. Salonga says, people are full of surprises. And indeed, that the way the characters transformed in that book really surprised me. Next slide. And thank you, Amu. Oge shows us how Amu's neighbors surprise her in a wonderful way. And in Saturday, after a bunch of unhappy accidents devastate Ava's mother, Ava surprises us by turning this disaster of a day on its head and saying, today was special. Today was splendid. I love that. I love that scene. I love that perspective. Oge and Aaron, can you talk about this aspect of how in your books you've shown that people can surprise us? And how would you like your readers to surprise themselves? How about Oge? Oge, you want to go first?
Okay. Yeah. No. As I was thinking about this question, yes, there are the words and there's the story in Thank You, Amu and Saturday, but I actually would like to talk a little bit about the collage work in Saturday and Thank You, Amu, because when I think about surprises, that really resonates with me in regards to my collage work. I think as a collage artist, collage is a conversation. You talk to the work and the work talks back to you, and you can put all the intention you desire, but the work will always find a way to surprise and humble you at times. And I think what's really exciting for me as I think about the medium is how a lot of the things I use, these old book scraps, these maps and these newspapers, these are things that people think are trash, you know, they're things that we don't think are very meaningful, that we have a lot of, that we want to throw away, that are just ordinary, regular things that we just have all around. But the beautiful thing is somehow if you snip these little pieces and you put them on a page, suddenly what was seemingly trash is something that's beautiful, you know, and maybe they were always beautiful. And so I see my work as a collage artist as revealing the magic in these materials, but it also makes me, I would hope that readers would think about what are these ordinary things in our lives that we are constantly overlook? What magic are we failing to see all around us?
Well, when you talk about some of the collage work, one surprise I had was in, for instance, the park scene. I think it might have been the double spread. Looking and seeing that the messy thing coming out of the dog's mouth was actually a scrap of paper that said "woof."
Yeah.
I just thought it was a bunch of lines.
I got you.
Erin and Trotta Kelly, do you want to tell us a little bit about surprises, how this factors into your books and how you want readers to surprise themselves too?
Sure. So, you know, my favorite surprises to write about, I think, are when my characters surprise themselves. So as a reader and a writer, I tend to be drawn to characters who are, you know, lonely, introspective, and who have a self-belief, a core belief about themselves that is not kind. And I think I respond to those characters and I write those characters because that's who I was at a young age. And my books tend to focus on changing them, learning to change that self-belief about themselves that is unkind. Whether it's through their own inner growth or other people or all of the above or life experiences. But my hope is that the characters in my books surprise themselves by realizing that they do have value, they do have a voice, they do matter, they are visible. And through that, you know, my hope is that the kid reading the book feels that way about themselves too, and says, you know what, I do matter. There's someone out there who feels the way I do. And that validation, you know, works wonders for all of us. You know, a lot of times we just want permission to feel the way we do as adults, as kids, at any age. And I think that's really powerful. So that's my hope with my books.
Well, thank you for that answer. And I have to say that in We Dream of Space, I was floored by the surprise changes in the characters that happened toward the end. And they really had me cheering. I said, yes, thank you, Erin. You did not let me down.
Thank you, Janet.
Cecilia, how about if we take another question from the Q&A box?
Okay. Here's our question. Do you think that there is something about this particular moment in time that makes readers more receptive and eager for unique stories, especially those children who feel that they haven't been represented well in literature? Cece, do you want to start with that?
Let me make sure I read the captions here. Oh yeah, okay. I think one of the really interesting things that's happening right now is how, just like right now, we have been invited into each other's homes, and I get to see Oge's awesome stuff back there that I want to like dig through, and it's just really, really neat to see. And that has given us a little window into something that feels more authentic. You know, I'll go back to the late night TV hosts, they're doing their broadcast at home and we get this little peek. And I think people are really responding to that and want more of that. And I think that will definitely make people more receptive to finding out the details, the nitty gritty of all kinds of people. That's what I want to see happen. I mean, this is sort of hopeful, wishful thinking, but I do think people are eager to know more about people who are different than they are.
Okay, do you want to chime in there?
Oh, yeah, no, I can definitely agree with that, with everything going on with like the Black Lives Matter protests and things like that. I definitely saw a renewed interest for a lot of my work, and having those voices of Black creators. And I just think I think that I'm really excited about, and people are having more conversations about, we're having more conversations about racism, we're having more conversations about discrimination in various industries and whatnot, but we're also having more conversations about there's a certain level of like honesty or vulnerability that I see in a lot of creators right now who are really speaking about these experiences that they've had in their life and sharing that with readers, especially young readers, and really just giving that to them, so that it really goes back to what Erin was saying earlier, like, and Cece touched on, about everyone's had that feeling of feeling lonely and all alone, and these creators are making themselves vulnerable in their work, and they really are reaching a new subset of readers who they haven't had that story or had someone depict these kinds of experiences in that way, and they really get to have that and celebrate that, which I think is special.
And I think one of the things that I think historically a big piece that's been missing as far as real actual change is there's often a lack of self-examination and self-awareness. And it feels like, and I hope this is true, that people are doing more of that, because no one ever sits there and thinks, boy, I'm really closed-minded. My thought process is super antiquated. I mean, people don't usually do that historically. They're always looking outward at where the problems are instead of looking inward. And none of us are immune to stereotyping or judgment or any of that. And I think that's how you actually change things, is taking time to look within yourself and say, wait a minute, why did I just have that thought? Why did I just make that assumption about someone? And trying to dismantle it from within. I think that's the piece that's been missing, and it feels like more of that is happening, and I hope that's true, and I hope it stays true.
Wonderful, thank you for that. And here's another question. A librarian who's been part of a conversation with other librarians who are having such a difficult time right now, even reading books. Is the current situation with the pandemic impacting or influencing your creativity? And do you have words of wisdom to help get through these difficult days? Erin, can we start with you?
Yeah, so I have noticed a change. First of all, I believe in a no guilt lockdown. So if you're not reading as much as you used to, that's okay, right? This is a very strange time we're in. I think for me, the book I'm working on now, it kind of took a more hopeful turn than I intended. Not that I intended it to be unhopeful, if that's a word, but it's taking on a more joyful angle than I had anticipated. And I think it's because I, and probably many of you, are craving some kind of joyful experience, right? Because everything is so terrible right now, like on every front. So that's how it's kind of affected me. But I think we should all give ourselves a break if we're not reading as much as we think we should. I think some of us are thinking of this like, oh, this is like a unexpected vacation and I should be taking advantage of it. But it isn't. Remember, it is not an unexpected vacation, because we all are operating under an undercurrent of stress. Even if we have a nice quiet home and don't have a million kids to take care of, we're all stressed. So this is not, you know, a vacation per se. So I think it's important that we're not too hard on ourselves, you know, for not getting XYZ accomplished.
Okay.
Yeah, no, the beginning of quarantine, it was really, really difficult for me. I actually stopped working for quite a bit, and I was just in my room for a solid week or two. And I felt, with everything going on, I knew that a lot of people were losing their jobs, and a lot of people were dealing with a lot of stuff in their lives, and we're dealing with a lot of uncertainty. And I felt really useless, where I was like, okay, you sit here and you make these like picture books, like, and there are people who, like, you're not helping you. I felt very useless. And so I felt like I was in standstill or on standby for a solid minute there. And until one day you realize you can't just like sit around forever. And so I just went back to my table one day and was like, just cutting paper and just gluing it down and just trying to find, just working and not really having something specific that I was trying to work on. And I feel like through that process, it was like almost like a wake up call, or reminded me, I'm like, no, this work, it does matter, you know, like these joyful stories are exactly what people need. Like this is the moment for these things. And it's also been kind of interesting, at least for my book Saturday, you're dealing with disappointments and cancellations. How many people have reached out to me and been like, I've been reading this book over and over again in quarantine. So I think that sometimes there can be a feeling, at least I felt it as a creator, where like I wasn't directly like, at least I felt like I wasn't directly helping or being there for kids, especially with all the school visit cancellations and things like that. But I think that the stories that we're writing, and especially stories of joy, are needed more now than ever.
It's my turn. It's my turn.
It's your turn, Cece.
I had a lot of the same thoughts that Oge had about, you know, what's the point? You know, what am I mean, not necessarily what's the point, but just, you know, here I am trying to make books, and but I've actually done everything except make books during this time. I seem to be finding the joys of iMovie and making all these goofy little movies, and I'm doing a lot of sewing, and I'm making a lot of things, but I'm not making books at the moment, which is very strange. But I haven't been, I usually get hit on the side of the head with a good idea, and I haven't been hit in the head for a while now. So I think I'm so distracted by the news, unfortunately, and everything around me, and worrying about my parents and worrying about my kids and what's happening next, that there's no room for that. And so I'm doing these little projects that are there to keep me sane. And the one beneficial thing I think that I've made is I've been making these little in-depth looks at the chapters of El Defo and talking with actual people from the book, like Martha, and sharing that stuff with everybody, just as partly something to do, but also something that that hopefully kids can enjoy while they're home. And I don't know. I'm just but I mean, this period, I've been a mess. I've really had a hard time with not so much the quarantine, because I already live under a rock. That part's fine. I could keep living like this forever, but it's just everything else, and the it's just a hard time to be living through, and it's hard when our leaders don't always lead. And so I know we should say something more positive than that. So there's a lot of joy in making things. And I highly recommend that if you're feeling down, make something, even if it's just a cake, you know, because at least you can go to bed thinking, I didn't do anything, but golly, I made a cake, you know, and it was good. So, I
Making
mean,
a cake, that's a big thing. That's a great thing.
Cake. So,
Well,
and, you know, this isn't a
all
let them
maybe-
eat cake moment, but anyway.
You might all feel like you're not doing that much or you're feeling a little stuck, but I'm looking at the chat box and people are saying, thank you for your books. Thank you for what you're doing. Authors and illustrators are lifting us up. So you may feel a little stalled, but there is so much love and appreciation coming through from the attendees here.
Thank
So
you.
back to you, Janet.
Great. Well, thank you all three of you for those answers. Those were great answers. Cece, I want to just mention that on the PDF of resources under your name, I listed a link to your website where you've been putting the deep dive videos pretty much every Monday, something new. And I think that that's an enormous accomplishment. You referred to that, and I think that everybody should go over there right after this and watch those deep dive videos. Get a lot of food and watch those deep dive videos. Well, you mentioned joy, and a common complaint among people who are disinclined to share own voices books is that they're not fun to read. Well, the three of you have shown that this is wrong. Your books are full of joy. In fact, Oge, you have 2 books on an SLJ list focused on #BlackJoy that was released last month. And in that article, Vanessa Willoughby said, when living in an oppressive society, joy can be a radical act. Joy can be a radical act. Okay, can you talk about the way you infused your most recent book, The Oldest Student, How Mary Walker Learned to Read, and your other books with joy? Just build a little bit more on the answer you gave previously.
Yeah, of course. I think that, I think it's a common issue in media that there's this fascination or urge to take a brush and paint all Black stories, exclusively ones of brokenness and struggle. And I think it's important that Black children and all children understand that, yes, we live and we deal with an oppressive society, but oppression is not who we are. When I was a kid, my mom worked 7 days a week. And so I didn't see her really much at all. And somebody, like people, and that happened growing up, and people hear that and might think, oh, how bad for you. And that's like a sad thing. But when I think of my book Saturday, or I think about those special days that I spent with her going to a concert or going to the museum as we did, all I can think of is love, you know? I think that the power of authentic stories is the ability of reclaiming your narrative. And I think what's so powerful is when people are given the opportunity to tell their authentic stories, how much nuance and complexity can be added into these conversations. And I think that's what's important while we're talking. I love that we are having a conversation about anti-racism right now, and we are thinking about these systems that are in place and what it means for children growing up. But I think that it's all just as it's important to think about anti-racism and think about these issues, it's just as important to celebrate joy and celebrate brown and Black people, and that is it's a beautiful, it's not a curse, it's not a bad thing, it's a beautiful thing to be who you are and to just really celebrate that. And so I think it's kind of interesting in regards to my work that it can be, my work can often be characterized as simple and sweet, and you read it and there's a page turn and you go, "Aw." But I also think that centralizing your story as a so-called marginalized individual is a radical act, you know? And so it's sweet, but there is meaning in here.
Power to us radical people. In an interview with WBUR Radio, Erin Intrada-Kelly said this about her book, Lalani of the Distant Sea. I wanted to write a book about ordinary people doing extraordinary things, about ordinary people evoking change. And these people, and Lalani specifically, aren't the loudest or the bravest people in the room. Lalani's single greatest virtue is her compassion and empathy. She's brave because she is compassionate. I just love the fact that you said that, Erin. And in response to that empowering thought, I want to move a little bit toward the close with my poem, You Can Do It Right Now. And each time I say the word you, give yourself a little hug or a pat on the shoulder, okay? Because each one of us is the you that I'm talking about here. All right, so you can do it right now. You can shout at a march. You can quietly pray. You can read the news and share it today. You can send the mayor of your town a note. You can make a sign that tells people to vote. You can talk to your family. You can listen to friends. There are different ways to reach the same ends, to fight injustice, to show that you care. You can do it right now from anywhere. Well, that's my poem. You can do it right now. Thank you to our speakers, Erin and Oge. Thank you to ALSC Program Officer Sarah Poland and outgoing ALSC President Cecilia McGowan of the King County Library System, and a couple of people who haven't been on screen. A special shout out again to Paige Bentley Flannery and Gay Hinchliff for all their heavy lifting behind the scenes to make this program happen. I'll turn things back now to Cecilia McGowan to end our program, but let me repeat that I'm hoping you'll think of our conversation today as just one step in our journey as learners. So let's continue learning on social media using these hashtags. We've got ALSC PP for President's Program, ALSC PP 2020, and ALA Virtual 20. And remember to tag We Are ALSC. And I'll turn it over to you, Cecilia.
Thank you, Janet. Thank you for moderating, and Cece, Erin, and Oge for your thoughtful and heartfelt discussion. And to those of you watching, thank you for attending and your support of the Association for Library Service to Children. We really couldn't do it without you. And I urge you to explore the legacy of Charlemae Rollins. That's what this President's Program is, Charlemae Rollins Lecture Program. She championed and advocated for authentic stories and images of Black youth in children's literature. You can find more about Ms. Rollins and her work on the ALSC website. And now we all have to go away, but thank you and goodbye.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks for being
Bye.
here. Woohoo!
Bye, thank you.